It is time for our college football best bets presented by FanDuel, and it's Danny Kanell versus Chip Patterson all season, and Danny has been so bad we had to blur out his record. It is not safe for work. It is not safe for streaming. Chip continues to just crush it. 13-6 last week. He's 102-83 this season. So, Danny, your new challenge is to swim to the surface. Get level. Get to 500. Look at you. You're going deep down there where the FSU shipwreck is. You see that?
That is messed up.
You've got a better winning percentage than Florida State.
That is true.
Here we are. Getting close to the end of the season, and you've got a ways to go. And Chip's
That's right. We'll
Chip's
row
just
the boat.
up there rowing the boat.
PJ Fleck. I'll just row the boat.
That's a good idea from our producer Boney. I thought maybe since Chip is doing so well that maybe Chip should have been on an airplane instead of the boat, because he's way above 500. Chip, you think you can keep Danny down there, or are you gonna extend? Are you gonna extend a lifeboat to him, or are you just gonna keep him down there?
Well, look, this is ultimately about a 55% winning percentage. That's about, like a Chip standard. And that's why it's rowing the boat. That's why it's chopping wood. Because we just take it bit by bit, yard by yard, game by game, and often third quarter by third quarter, but anything we can do to be profitable.
I said it was Boney's idea. It was mostly Chip's idea.
I like it.
Do this.
I like that graphic.
So let's get it going here this week. We have 4 ranked teams on byes, including an Indiana team that is still unbeaten, 10-0, Ole Miss, Miami, Army on byes as well. Let's start with number 2, Ohio State. This is a noon game at Wrigley Field in Chicago. 28.5-point favorites against Northwestern. Chip, he's already going to dive deep into the Chipalytics for this play. What is it?
Yeah, we're going to go Ohio State in the 6th inning. Oh, I'm sorry, the third quarter. And we're going to go ahead and take a Buckeyes team that continues to be really sharp coming out of the locker room, but B, also a little bit slower to get going. They don't necessarily feel like they need to dive deep into the bag. They are a team, especially offensively, that wants to see how you're going to try to defend them and then come up with some of their counter punches for after halftime. The third quarter has been extremely profitable all season, and I think that here it is the way to go once again. Sight lines are going to be a little bit different. You're not really going to have a feel for the field until you get about 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes of action. So we're going to go back to the well, Buckeyes in the third quarter.
If this was at the practice facility on Lake Michigan, I'd probably be a little bit nervous about a letdown, but I think you're actually going to see a lot of Buckeye fans in attendance to see a game at Wrigley Field and their team have a chance to have a big win. I think Ohio State comes out the gate. They're getting so used to these noon kickoffs that typically you might worry about teams waking up earlier than they're used to. This is Ohio State's schedule. They're just kind of on a routine of having these noon kickoffs. I think they come out strong from the start, and I think they might come close to hitting the over just on their own total. So I'll lay them with Ohio State and take the over.
As a double-digit favorite, the last 6 conference games, 5-1 against the spread, including several games this season. The last one against Purdue last week at -37.5. They cleared that. They will host unbeaten Indiana next week, also at noon. Texas is at Arkansas, Danny. It's a 13.5-point spread. This was the place where Tennessee went and lost straight up a few weeks ago.
This is one of the rivalry games that doesn't get talked about a lot because we're bringing back A&M versus Texas, and that's such a huge game. But this is an old school rivalry of 2 teams that don't like each other. And you might say that Texas doesn't consider a rival, but Arkansas does. And that's where I think this becomes really interesting. And I think this is a little bit of an overreaction to what we've seen the last couple weeks, right? The last time out we saw Arkansas gave up 63 points. Taylor Green goes down. That's, all of a sudden the season looks lost for Sam Pittman. And then what do you see out of Texas? You see them boat race Florida, look like they don't have any problems with them. Watch out for Arkansas here playing at home. This is a rivalry game, like I mentioned. Taylor Green off of a bye. He's been practicing this week. I think he's back healthy, and he has been the difference for this Arkansas team. So go ahead and give me Arkansas, the home dog, and I'll take the under because I do think Arkansas's defense will be able to slow down that offense, which put up so many points last week for Texas. Again, another bye situation to get that defense healthy as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the defensive injuries are something else that really have my attention because there's not a lot of depth there, and that's why we saw Ole Miss absolutely run past them. I think that the strength for this Arkansas defense is on the defensive line, and this Texas offensive line has future NFL players on it, but in performance, it hasn't always been great. Sometimes it's too many penalties. Sometimes it's allowing too much pressure on Quinn Ewers, and for a lot of the season, they haven't been able to get any consistency with the ground game, and most importantly, we always check the Arkansas gaming calendar. We had the opening of a new deer season last weekend during the off week. So that means the families were able to get out there, get up in the deer stand. This Saturday, they're going to be in the seats. I'm going to go Arkansas in the first half, plus 7.5. They come out firing, maybe a little bit more compete than what Texas has for the early kickoff.
So that's why Chip's ceiling, floor is 55%, because he goes next level. Checking those gaming calendars, you know that Arkansas is always excited to get a big game in Fayetteville, because that doesn't always happen, because they have neutral site games. They play in Little Rock sometimes, so that place should be hopping for that. Let's go to a 10 a.m. local time kick. This is wild. This is the earliest you'll ever get a kick. It's noon Eastern, but it's in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. 17th ranked Buffaloes now control their own fate in the Big 12, laying a big number at home against Utah.
I hate the kick time, by the way. And I know it's, there's been a lot of controversy about what happens, but 10 a.m. local is tough for anybody to get up, including the players. That's why I do think you could get potentially a sleepy, sluggish start from both teams.
Do you have to wake up?
6 a.m. Like
6 a.m. is the latest you can wake up.
Remember anybody in college, what time did you wake up? Like, no one gets up that early, including athletes. And I would guarantee you that both teams probably practiced earlier to try to get their bodies into a routine for this one. But I don't think there's anything you can do to really acclimate yourself in that quick of a window. So I think it will be a slower starting game. I actually like Utah in this game to keep it inside the number. I like Colorado to win, but Utah has the #1 scoring defense in the conference. We know that's what you're going to get from Kyle Whittingham. They switched up quarterbacks with Brandon Rose. Didn't see a lot of success there, so I don't see them scoring a lot of points either against Colorado. I think it's relatively a comfortable win for Colorado, but I think it comes later in the game with a less amount of points. So I like Utah to cover the number. It's the Big 12. There's not much of a gap from top to bottom, and I like the under.
Lay them, ladder it, alt line. Look, this Utah team is going to need some heart. And unfortunately, that heart is shattered still in Provo. And picking up the pieces after an emotional loss like that is really hard. We continue to get more reports by the week of more and more Utah players that are being ruled out for the season due to injury or entering the transfer portal. I mean, shoot, I think we might be back to Lil Isaac Wilson back at quarterback, which against a Colorado defense that I think has done a good job of getting better throughout the season is not going to bode well for the Utes. Utah's defense might have the edge on the Buffs in the early stages of the game, but you know who else had the edge on the Buffs in the early stage of the game? Texas Tech. And what ended up happening is you give enough possessions to Shadur Sanders, to Travis Hunter, they will make you pay. I would not be surprised to get a slow start, but unfortunately for Utah, it's a 60-minute ball game, and this is a 60-minute bet. I'm going Colorado laying the points.
Okay, he's laying them with the Buffs.
I would not expect any great officiating for Utah, the way they went in on the Big 12 officials either.
That is true. The Utah athletic director went wild after the game at BYU, got fined quite a bit of money for that as well. Let's go to the ACC. It's 20th ranked Clemson at Pitt, and this is a double-digit number here. Clemson was a team that lost a game like Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago, but bounced back. Pittsburgh did not bounce back. They've lost 2 games in a row.
They really have. This is one of those injury games, too. Now, Eli Holstein left the game with a head injury. The concussion protocol was in effect. I think he's going to be back, and that's why I'm making this play. But if you want to wait up until game time to make sure he's playing, I would advise you to do so, because Nate Yarnell came in, and it was not the same in that offense that they've been running pretty successfully. I think this is an opportunity for Pitt to come back home, kind of regroup, and have a chance to play against a Clemson team that I am still not sold against. It was a good win for them, and I thought they would potentially stumble last week, and it wasn't exactly a resounding yes. Yes, they got the cover, but they only put up 24 points. It was sort of a little bit closer than I think you would expect from a Clemson team that has dominated this conference over the last decade. So I think this one stays inside the number. So I like Pitt here, and I also like the under, and that might be more because of Clemson's defense being able to slow down this Pitt offense, but Exactly, but I do think Pitt's defense will be a little bit of a more of a challenge for Clemson and Cade Klubnik and Phil Maffa, who was another 100-yard game last week. I think it'll be a little more challenging for him this week.
I'm expecting a business-like approach from the Tigers. They did not allow an offensive touchdown until the 1:43 mark, with the game basically in hand against Virginia Tech. The Hokies got that 7-0 lead off a blocked field goal return for a touchdown. So, yeah, Clemson might want to tighten up on some of these special teams, but that's besides the point, because Pitt's offense has fallen off a cliff from the hot start to the season. You look at the score of that Syracuse game and you think that, that falls in line with the start, but then you might remember there were 3 pick sixes in that game, setting up 21 of those points. The offense has been kind of figured out in conference play now that the tape's out there on the new offensive coordinator and the new pieces that you have on offense. And I do think that Clemson's defense is playing at a very high level, completely squeezed the life out of the Hokies. So I think the approach for Clemson is to try to limit the mistakes and the turnovers, because Pitt has done a great job of sacks, tackles for loss, and interceptions. And you just try to ride that defense to a victory. Now, I think my best bet here, I would not be surprised if Cade Klubnik doesn't light it up, but I think it's going to be more conservative. I think under is the best bet.
All right, let's go to the American Conference. I mentioned Army is off this week, but you do have a team tied for first against a team that's in third place right now. It's Tulane and Navy. Tulane's won 7 straight, Danny. That's how they got into the playoff rankings this week at 25.
I think this is the best team in the American, the way they're playing right now. Their quarterback, Mensa, has had a really strong season. And you mentioned the 7 wins in a row. The only 2 losses against Power 4 opponents, and who they played pretty tough. In Kansas State, they play them at home to 1 possession. The Oklahoma score is a little bit misleading. There was a pick 6 in there late that kind of helped Oklahoma pull away. But you mentioned it, Chris, 7 wins in a row. I think that trend continues. Navy had a nice bounce-back win last week. Feels like some of their issues have been fixed with Blake Horvath, but I still think Tulane wins this one. And then anytime you see a service academy, the way they try to slow down the game, I'll take the under as well.
No. This is when everyone's zigging. And this is where it's our turn to zag, because I see a lot of explosive plays in this game. It's kind of been the book on Tulane for a lot of the season, that you can get one over on this defense. Now, John Summerall, he had great defenses when he was at Troy. And when they go up against lesser competition, they have been able to really limit the scoring. But I think that this is just going to be a game that gets a little sideways, because I do think Darian Mensah and the Tulane offense are going to be able to get explosive plays against Navy, which is going to keep Navy from really being able to possess the ball, because there's going to be the need to go in there and score. Lots of back and forth. Think back to the way that Memphis Navy game played out earlier this year. A massive win for the midshipmen, sure, but I'm talking about the nature of it. Higher scoring, and I think that's what we have here in Annapolis.
Okay, and if Tulane wins that game, they'd get to 7-0 in conference and tie Army at the top. We have many more games to pick here as we go through every ranked team in action. Penn State is in a great spot right now. They look like they're going to be hosting a playoff game as long as they don't trip up. They're at Purdue this week on CBS. Yeah, it's one of those weird weeks in November where some of those teams in the SEC will step out and just, grab a team like Mercer to come in to Tuscaloosa. Alabama, 41.5-point favorite in that game. Penn State with what looks like an easy in-conference game at Purdue. We're going to pick all these games in this block right here with Danny Kanell and Chip Patterson. And Chip, let's start with that Mercer team, because that wasn't a typo. They are 9-1 going into this game against Bama.
Yeah, top 10 nationally at the FCS level, first in their conference. And if you don't think the Bears are going to go into Bryant-Denny Stadium looking for a little bit of honey, then you are sadly misled. I mean, this is a team that is going to think about the competitiveness that they want to bring to this game. And if you are Alabama coming out of a massive win against LSU, I mean, sure, Kalen DeBoer would like to go out there and run the score up just to make sure everyone feels good about themselves. But this is going to be a game where you're going to be really relying on your backups. And in the transfer portal era, after the exit of Nick Saban and the exodus in the transfer portal, I don't think the 2s and the 3s for the Crimson Tide are quite on that same level as the 2s and the 3s from 5-6 years ago. Give me Mercer to score just enough to be able to cover this spread.
You know, I used to find these games, and if it was 7-3 in the first quarter, I'd screen grab it, and I'd be like, ooh, look, Alabama's overrated or something like that. Not this time. This game, Jalen Milroe's back to full health. I don't even think they have to run him that much. I think it's 35-3 at halftime, so all I need is another 10 points from those backups at the half. Chip, I'm rolling. I'm laying them here with the Tide against Mercer.
I don't know. Mercer's
that game.
They've already clinched a share of the SoCon.
Oh, so how invested are they?
In 92 years, Danny.
They need to make sure they have their postseason hopes. They might bench their starters too.
Special season. Let's go to the game on CBS, 3:30 Eastern Time. It's Penn State, 28.5-point favorite at Purdue. I've got a list of Purdue losses this season. They've lost by 35, they've lost by 45, they've lost by 46, and they've lost by 59. Will they lose by 29 or more?
So I have been told that Penn State is in this elite, group of teams in the top 10. And there are other teams in the top 10 that have already played Penn State. You mentioned a couple of those scores. Ohio State 45-0, Notre Dame 66-7, and Oregon 35-0. I think it'll be closest to the Oregon outcome. But I do think Penn State is in another a level clearly than Purdue is. Purdue is just licking their wounds right here. We were doing our Big 10 show on Tuesday and doing a big game breakdown. I was trying to make any case I could for Purdue, just saying, hey, just go YOLO on defense, blitz a lot, see if you can get a turnover, and you just hang on for dear life on the defensive side of the ball, maybe do some trick plays. I don't think it's enough. I think Penn State wins comfortably. I think they win and cover, and I'll take the under on the bet because I don't know if Purdue scores a point.
Hey, well, then let's just take that, okay? We're going Purdue team total under 10.5 because you saw it right there on the graphic. They just are not going to be able to score against the best defenses on their schedule. And I do think that Penn State is of that caliber of an Oregon, of an Ohio State, and of a Notre Dame. It is just desperation time. You go to Ryan Brown at quarterback, try to move him around a little bit. But this is a Nittany Lions defense that plays with an edge no matter who the opponent is. I do not see Purdue being able to eclipse more than 10 points in this game. So we're going Purdue team total under 10.5.
All right, now to a team that is the only unbeaten team in ACC play, but as of right now, not in the bracket because Miami is ranked higher and SMU is 14th right now, but 18.5-point favorites against Boston College. And the Castellanos situation is getting weird. He might have left the team. He's certainly not going to travel with them this week. So
no, there's reports that Thomas Castellanos is already, hitting the portal, and that's his plans. Bill O'Brien earlier said he was taking a break. Now he said he doesn't expect him to travel. There's some serious drama going on there. But I'm looking at SMU as the most disrespected team in the top 25 rankings that came out from the selection committee last night. And I think that is bad news for Boston College because Rhett Lashley is going to say, okay, you still don't think we're good enough? We're going to show you just how good we are. I think they are one of the more complete teams in the country, too. Boston College, I don't think Grayson James is the answer, even though he did come off the bench and was 5 of 6. But I think it's his first big start in a situation like this. I think it's too much. I will lay him with SMU and take the under.
I'm right there with you. And I do like that under call, too, because one thing that has been flying a little bit below the radar has been the way that this SMU defense has played at times, especially when they do need that group to really bow up. The overall statistical profile is not excellent, but I just look at the way that they compete, particularly along the defensive line. There have been some transfer portal additions that I think have been real difference makers. Credit Rhett Lashley and that staff for identifying where the team needed to get better as they made the transition to a power conference, and that's why they're in a position to win the ACC in their very first year of membership. They're not even taking TV money, and they still might get all the winnings and the playoff money. You got to love the sweet irony SMU's got going right now. Staying
in that conference, it's Louisville coming in at number 19 this week. First game since they really stunned Clemson in Death Valley. They're laying 20.5 at Stanford on the farm.
I thought it was going to be a hot take for me to say they're the best 3-loss team in the country, which really doesn't get you much, but they are the highest ranked 3-loss team. So it's good to see the committee taking note that all 3 of their losses have been by 1 possession to teams that are in the top 15. So I actually do think this Louisville team is better than their record says they are. Coming off after a bye, getting rested, it will be a tricky thing to navigate when they're on the road at a place that'll probably be pretty dead, but I think they do respond in this situation. Again, another team that I think is pretty complete. They're able to throw the ball, they're able to run it, and their defense is really really pretty physical. So I'll take Louisville. I'll lay the points, think they win by 3 touchdowns, and I will take the under as well.
Hey, Chip, over/under number of fans in the seats at kickoff.
At kickoff, I'm going to go with like 9,400, something
right, I'll
around
take the
there.
under.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that getting started and getting yourself fired up sometimes is a weird home field advantage. You know, that like Louisville, all of a sudden it's like, where's the energy right now? But once this thing gets rolling, it's going to be an absolute snowball because Stanford's defense is not built out from a depth perspective to be able to handle some of the injuries that they've had this year. And what you see from the product when this Stanford defense is out on the field is that they are so leaky. I mean, we are talking about giving up 450 or more yards of offense in 3 of their last 4 games. You know, they had NC State put up 59 on them, SMU put up 40, Notre Dame put up 49, and I do think that Louisville is of that caliber, certainly of the caliber of what NC State can do. So I'm going to attack the team total here. Cards, team total over 36.5.
All right, let's go to the Swamp, where there'll be a few more fans in the stands at kickoff. LSU in Florida. And the Tigers, one of those 3-loss teams that Danny Summer's saying, hey, don't count them out yet. Don't count them out yet. They're still in the playoff race. 4.5-point favorites here.
If they get in the playoff as a 3-loss team, I might retire. I might just quit my job because they are the most overrated 3-loss team because that's all they have really to go by is the teams that they've lost to. They don't really have a resounding win on the schedule, and some of their losses, including that USC one, looks worse than we thought. That's one of the reasons I like the Gators this weekend, not only to cover, potentially to win this game. This is one that really could salvage a season which feels like a lost cause for the Florida Gators. And I know it may seem contrary because we saw what happened in Austin. Texas blew them out. But when you saw DJ Lagway not on the field, I thought that was a clear message that they were gearing up for this game. Again, this is with the understanding that DJ Lagway does go. He was on the field taking warm-up reps last week. I think it was the smart thing to get him one more week of rest for this game. I think Florida is all in on this one, what it would mean for this program. Recruiting, the voice of approval to Billy Napier from Scott Strickland, their athletic director. They need a win. I think they could get it this weekend against LSU.
I don't have to reach that far back in my mind to remember a 6-game winning streak, a win against Ole Miss, a dominant performance against Arkansas. I think LSU is still a good football team. They obviously got pantsed by Alabama. If they have a difficulty here in Gainesville, that is a Brian Kelly problem. If they have difficulty in Gainesville, you know, that is a locker room problem. And those things might be true. You won't hear me throw this one on the Locks pod on Thursday, but I really think that LSU is a markedly better team than Florida. And so I think this is a short number. Give me the Tigers in a bounce back spot against a Florida team that was absolutely helpless on both sides of the ball just 1 week ago in Austin.
All right, SEC is wild. There's a scenario where as many as 7 teams could tie with 2 losses at the end of the season. We have the big one coming up still to pick, and it's actually a big spread as well. Tennessee and Georgia. Bulldogs coming off a really difficult defeat. Carson Beck is throwing all kinds of interceptions, but they are heavy favorites against Tennessee. Picking every game against the spread in the top 25. Notre Dame is up to number 8. They're at home laying a big number against Virginia. There's a top 25 matchup in the SEC that you might not think of right away. It's Missouri and South Carolina. The one you think of first is that Tennessee-Georgia game in Athens. And we also have Boise State, the top group of 5 team right now. They would be in the playoff as it stands. Let's start with that Notre Dame game. They play unbeaten Army at Yankee Stadium next week, but this week it's Virginia coming to town. Can they cover that number? Will they cover that number?
Or is it possibly a look-ahead game?
Would they really be looking ahead to Army?
Maybe they could. That's not the reason I'm banking on this.
If you lose to Northern Illinois at home, you
don't have that luxury. I agree with you. And I'm trying to figure out what Virginia is. They've been incredibly up and down. They've had some pretty good wins. They've also had some pretty bad losses, like they did in North Carolina a couple weeks ago. And they've got Tom Fornelli's favorite whoopsie-daisy king quarterback and Anthony Calandria. I'm going to say Tony Elliott's squad gets up for this game and plays well enough to keep it inside this number. Notre Dame has been rolling, but I think this is one of the better tests that they've had against the schedule, which has been an absolute joke. We saw saw them against Florida State last week. Just really, a game that was a complete shellacking of Florida State. I think this Virginia team is much more invested in the season and will play much better on the defensive side of the ball. So I'll take Virginia to cover, and I'll take the under.
I'm going to go with Notre Dame team total over. A couple things here. Number one, I would like Virginia to be a little bit spunkier. Maybe if you just hadn't really gotten up for a road game just last week, going out of the bye and getting the win against Pitt. So you're, coming off a big win with the second straight road game. Are you going to be able to do it in a game where you are going to be a huge uphill battle? I think we see that on the defensive side. And remember, this is a defense that, as Danny mentioned, had North Carolina absolutely shred them, particularly with the ground game. I see that happening for Notre Dame. And the other thing is sort of game scripting this out. I could see Anthony Calandria, Fields, and the rest of this group of playmakers for Virginia. I could see them scoring enough that Notre Dame doesn't decide to pack it in. They feel like they need to keep their foot on the gas. So with looking at Virginia with maybe a light hangover defensively, and then Notre Dame maybe needing to stay competitive, I'm going to attack that team total over for the Fighting Irish.
Over 36.5, the team total. They're outscoring opponents by 34 points per game in that 7-game winning streak since the loss to Northern Illinois. To one of those top 25 matchups in the SEC. Chip, why is South Carolina a 12.5-point favorite against Missouri?
I know, because they should be 17. Because South Carolina is America's team. We need someone to get them out of here. I'm talking about Missouri. I'm talking about a Missouri team that when they left their comfy confines, they get blasted by 34. When they leave their comfy confines, they get blasted by 31. They were in an absolute dogfight with an Oklahoma team, thinking that they were going to just win a game by kicking field goals. So excuse me for not rushing to the window to go put down my hard-earned American dollars on the Missouri Tigers when this South Carolina team's been playing its best football of the season over the course of the last month. I just see the Gamecocks with Lenoris Sellers healthy, with Kyle Kennard making his case for the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. I see them causing all kinds of problems for the Tigers. So give me South Carolina at home to snap what has been a losing streak to Missouri. So you've got a little bit of old SEC East rivalry action here. I will take Shane Beamer and the Gamecocks.
Oh, Chip, but didn't you hear Eli Drinkwitz saying, hey, don't count us off of the playoff just yet? Holding out there, trying to catch the committee's attention.
Well, I saw a stat during their game, and now it was on ESPN, but the stat was, or the analytics anyway, if Missouri wins out, 66% chance they're in the playoff.
I talked to Eli Drinkwitz this week. He said any team that goes 10-2 in the SEC should be in. So that's the case that he's making. This game, to me, I do not see either one of these teams as good as the ranking that's in front of their name. I think these are two middle-of-the-road SEC teams banging heads against each other, which tells me it'll be much more close to a one-possession game. Give me Missouri on the road to keep the number close. I know they've been playing both quarterbacks. Brady Cook's been injured. Does he play? Does he not play? Drew Pine, getting more comfortable in that role, was much more careful with the football, had 3 touchdown passes against Oklahoma, and their defense did play better against Oklahoma's offense, holding them in check both through the ground and through the air. I think they'll be able to contain Lenoris somewhat to keep it inside that number, but defenses do rule the day in this matchup. I'll take Missouri with the big number, getting all those points, and I'll take the under.
And if it is a one-score game, Missouri's been great in one-score games since the start of last season, 8-0 in games decided by a score. Let's go to another spread that is not one score in the SEC between two ranked teams. And look, Tennessee is on the road against a struggling Georgia team, or at least a struggling quarterback in Carson Beck. This number is big. I wonder how much of that number is baked into the uncertainty around Nico Iamaleava.
Yeah, there's a lot of conflicting reports out there after dealing with, concussion protocol last week, coming out of the game for precautionary reasons, even though it was really early in the game at halftime. The game was not exactly a resounding blowout. So again, this is a play that if you want to feel more comfortable about it and wait till Nico is cleared and you see him on the field warming up, then by all means go ahead and do it. But I'm going to assume that he does play and go ahead and take Tennessee in this number. And even if he doesn't, the reason I like Tennessee is not because their offense offense because it hasn't been putting up massive numbers, although they are running the ball really well. It's about the defense, and I think the defense keeps them in this game because Georgia's offense, and we talked a lot about, Carson Beck is having a crisis of confidence. He cannot stop throwing the ball to the other team. I think he's going to be under duress. James Pierce Jr. is going to be chasing him around all afternoon. My favorite play is the under, but in a lower scoring game, I'll take Tennessee in those points.
I think it's a whole Georgia offense problem. The injuries that they've had on the offensive line have really hurt that group's development. Trevor Etienne's been a huge disappointment based on what we thought we were going to get with him joining this team and trying to add a spark to the run game. They're so lost offensively that they're just trying to like throw screens to play runaway like little school children from Ole Miss's pass rush. I am able to very quickly end in a very comfortable place. That's a Georgia first half under, because I do think that this is going to be a Georgia offensive approach where the last thing that you want is to allow Carson Beck to make a mistake early, play a little field position, try and make Tennessee march the length of the field against a Georgia defense that straight up won you the game in your best win of the season earlier this year at Texas. And so I think the Bulldogs lean on their defense. I think Tennessee does as well. I don't think either offensive line has the edge on the opposing defensive line. And so I will gladly, at a key number of 24.5, take another first half under with the Dogs.
All right, those are the two ranked SEC games. Let's go to a game that's on CBS Sports Network involving a team that would be in the playoff right now, the Boise State Broncos. They did fall a spot because they only won by 7 last week against Nevada. They're at San Jose State. Our Amanda Guerra will be on the sidelines for this one, Dan.
Awesome. I will definitely tune it in for Amanda, but also to see the Ashton Genty show, which kind of was back in action last week in a game that was much closer against Nevada. Chris, you mentioned them dropping a spot, but Genty did go off for 209 yards. I think that's the best news for Spencer Danielson, the head coach out there, of saying, you know what, we're going to go ahead and show people what we're capable of. That was the wake-up call. I think they win by a big number here, getting back on track. So give me Boise. I'll lay them.
Yeah, I'm going to take the under in this game. I think that right now Boise's defensive line has really started to emerge. They're going to make it really difficult for San Jose State to run the ball. Not a great rushing offense anyway, but when you make San Jose State one-dimensional, I think it's going to be tough for them to string together long possessions. Boise State leans on the ground game. Genty gets yards. Genty gets touchdowns, but the full game goes under 61.5.
Again, 7 Eastern Saturday on CBS Sports Network is that one. When we come back, we have a couple more Big 12 games to pick. BYU remains unbeaten, but only a 2.5-point home favorite to a 3-win team. And Kansas State has a tough one as well. Just a few more games to pick against the spread here, and we're going Big 12 start and finish. What's that called? Bookends. Big 12 bookends. That's what it is. Arizona State and Kansas State going to lead things off for us. Chris Hassel, joined by Danny Kanell in studio. We have Chip Patterson with us as well. Arizona State, Kansas State. The winner is still going to have a shot to get to the Big 12 championship game. Kansas State laying 8.5 at home.
This is as much a play about the Big 12 where you cannot tell the difference in the top 3 teams and the bottom 3 teams. So I'm going to go ahead and take Arizona State here. Cam Scatteraboo has been on track to play, Kenny Dillingham said, after he's banged up, missed last week. I think this team has been really one of the more surprising stories that doesn't get enough coverage. Kansas State's been a little bit up and down. They're coming off a bye. Avery Johnson, a rough performance. But I'm going to say Arizona State keeps this one inside the number, and I'm going to say it's a lower scoring game. So give me Arizona State with the 8.5 and the under 49.5.
I understand that starting position there, Danny, but I'm going to trust 2 things. Number one, I'm going to trust Manhattan at night. We've got a 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. local kickoff where that Kansas State team and that environment can be really special and really difficult for opponents. And number 2, that this Kansas State ground game has been able to get a little bit better coming out of the off week, because when we saw them against Houston, they could not run the football. When Kansas State can't run it, it really hurts Avery Johnson's Wisconsin's ability to see the field and get good matchups in the passing game. And so I think we get a healthy Avery Johnson, we get an effective ground game, and we get a rowdy atmosphere in Bill Snyder Family Stadium. So I'll take Kansas State and I'll lay the big number.
All right, let's go to the #1 team in the country. That's the Oregon Ducks. They're at Wisconsin as a 14.5-point favorite, Danny.
So, man, I've had a hard time with Oregon the last few weeks trying to pick a side. You know, Michigan, I said, oh, maybe Michigan keep it inside the number. And then what do you get? Dan Lanning scores a touchdown late just to get the cover. And it's like, oh, he could have taken the knee. I do think this is a Wisconsin team. Again, a team that's been incredibly up and down. But what we've seen from Oregon the last couple weeks is a very business-like approach. They haven't been showing a whole lot, and I don't think they have to in this game either. But I do think this is a place where Madison will get up for the #1 team coming to town. And I think their defense will load up the box and try to shut down the run. They may not have much success, but their secondary actually is the strength of this team. So I don't know if it's a game where Dylan Gabriel and that Oregon offense can get a ton of big plays. So I also don't know if Wisconsin scores many points, but I think their defense can at least contain and slow down Oregon's offense somewhat. So I'll take Wisconsin as the home dog over that 2-touchdown number and the under.
I do think Wisconsin can score some points. You know, I ran to go figure out what we were looking at. A team total of 19.5. Okay, so let's think about what's happening, because it's the 8th game in a row without an off week for Oregon. Where's that going to show up? Because if you ask me, I think it might show up defensively. And I think we've started to see a little bit of an erosion in performance. First, Michigan is able to move the ball. You know, they have a couple breakdowns in scoring position, but still Colston Loveland, a couple of the trick plays created some explosives for the Wolverines. Then last week, Billy Edwards also is able to move the ball effectively. A couple turnovers end up hurting their point total. I think Wisconsin, coming out of an off week against a defense that is playing its 8th game in a row, I think at home, that's how you give yourself a chance for the upset. Wisconsin team total over 19.5.
Okay, yeah, had to sit on that 42-10 loss to Iowa for extra long, so they might be extra motivated on that one. Let's go to Texas A&M. Weird spot here. They've been sitting on that 24-point loss to South Carolina. They're at home against New Mexico State.
Yeah, this is one of those weeks that's like the longest week of your life. You just want to get back on the football field, and yet you have to wait because you have a bye week. But this is the one where I think you get that taste out of your mouth. I think Texas A&M has a big bounce-back performance. All you have to do, if you're Mike Elko, is show some of the film last year in New Mexico State, shocking some SEC teams. I think Texas A&M wins big, and I think they might come close to that over all on their own. I think it's a big performance for the Aggies.
Yeah, the New Mexico State team that was taking everybody down had Jerry Kill and Diego Pavia, neither of those being present here. I'm actually just going to target the first half. Obviously, Texas A&M still has a lot of work left to do to accomplish their goals this season, including that big game against Texas at the end of the year. You want your backups to play in the second half. And when I think about the way that things have gone against even quality competition, not even on Texas A&M's tier, this was a team for New Mexico State. They were down 21 at halftime to Western Kentucky. They were down 27 at halftime to Jacksonville State. They were down 31 at halftime to Fresno State. I think Texas A&M is tiers above all those other squads. So I'll take the Aggies in the first half, lay the 21.5.
All right, to the other team in New Mexico, there's only 2 of them. The Lobos at home against number 18 Washington State. Wazoo off to their best start since Mike Leach was the coach there in 2018.
Yeah, it's the team that's kind of no one is talking about. They've jumped up 3 spots in the committee's rankings, and they do have an outside chance of possibly making to the playoff. Now, they need a lot of help, but the only thing they can control is getting style points and winning big. And I think this is an opportunity for them to do that. I love this play last week. Then they won against Utah State, covered that number for me then. I'll go ahead and back them again. And but this number is huge, though. I think it's way too many points, and that's 72.5 for the total, so I'll go under that. But I think Washington State behind John Mateer rolls in this one.
Look, I've got scars from New Mexico unders this year. Okay, you don't understand. Like this is a team that has played some bananas games. We're talking totals that finish in the triple digits, the 90s, the 80s with regularity. And I think that the way it would go that way is that Washington State's defense just might get tired from chasing around New Mexico quarterback Devin Dampier, who's a lot of fun. He's really mobile, and being able to extend plays is a lot of how the Lobos create their explosiveness. So I'm going to go with the under as well, but I'm going to do it before the legs get tired. first half under 37.5. Because as I've seen and been burned on too many times, when defenses get tired of chasing around Devin Dampier, they allow more explosive plays. I'm going to say for 30 minutes, Washington State's got the legs to keep him a little bit bottled up.
All right, one more game to pick, and it involves Kansas, and it's a lot like last week. We were sitting here. Kansas was only a 3-point dog to a ranked Iowa State team, and what happened? Kansas dominated that football game. Now, only a 2.5-point underdog at number 6 BYU, Danny.
This is Brett Yormark's least favorite team in the Big 12 because they are ruining the chance to possibly get 2 teams in the playoff. And I think they do it again. Lance Leipold, this Kansas team is way better than their record says they are. And I was very happy for them last week to finally get a win, to show something for it. Jalen Daniels' story has been incredible. You know, the ups and downs he's had in his career, missing last season. But they are really starting to play with a lot of confidence. They just saw themselves get a big win. I have been BYU's biggest backer, but I took the points last week with the home dog in Utah. I'll take the dog, even though it's on the road this time. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas plays the role of spoiler again and gets the outright win. So I'll take Kansas in a higher scoring affair in the over.
Yeah, let's just grab that higher scoring affair because everything, if this game was played in a vacuum, if this game was played at a neutral field, I would say water has to find its level. BYU can't keep getting away with it. But there's 3 terrifying words that are rattling around my skull right now. Provo at night. When that chocolate milk hits, oh boy, weird stuff starts to happen. And we remember Avery Johnson, another Kansas quarterback, superstar. His brain just like popped right there on national television. Another late night game in Provo that was one of the big launching points for the Cougars in terms of this undefeated start. I don't want anything to do with that spread, but I totally agree with you because while Kansas's offense has been rolling, its defense has continued to give up tons and tons of yards. Basically, anybody not named Houston gets about 450 yards against this Jayhawks team. So I think BYU moves the ball and scores. I think Kansas moves the ball and scores. It's probably going to be weird. It hopefully won't come down to the refs, but it'll be Provo at night, and I think we'll see touchdowns.
All right, Kansas, they beat Iowa State last week, knocked them out of the rankings. They've got BYU this week, and they finish up next week with Colorado. So they really are shaping the Big 12 championship game and potentially a playoff spot. Chip, best of luck to you keeping Danny underwater. Danny, best of luck trying to swim back to 500. Danny, part of the great team and coverage that we have for you each and every Saturday morning beginning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. It is our college football preview show. Don't miss it.